Hello there, my name is Kerek, and you may also know me as v1.0 from the v1.0 page, and I would like to introduce the Particles kit to you. Basically, the kit is your ticket to the thinking particles world without the need to use any espresso nodes or stuff like that at all. You just need this kit, so you will be able to generate main and child particles, affect them by 17 different groups of dynamics, and make them visible with 4 different options. So let's head on to the main particle settings and I show you how you can do it with ease. So at first you need to use the Particles Kit emitter where you want to set up your main and child particles. The first thing you must do is you must set your groups. You can do this by clicking to the Simulation, Thinking Particles settings. After that you need to create your particle groups. You right click on the All and you add 2 groups. You rename those to main and child particles and you make some colors to it so you will see the difference in the viewport, and after that you need to drag your main particles to the main particles group and the child particles to the child particles group. I'm gonna put my thinking particles panel here because we will use it later as well. And if you're working with the particles, you should do this because it's easier to drag and drop the groups you need. So what you want to do after that, you want to set up your main particles. Right now we are using a standard particle and we're bursting from the emitter. When you burst from the emitter, you can control the position and the rotation of the emitter by clicking on the Particles Kit emitter. The main setup, when you click to the play button, as you can see, your main particles are being born. It's very similar to the main emitter here, so if you're familiar with it, you will use this with ease. So after that you want to set up your particles. You can set from 3 different types of particles and you can set the number of particles here. Right now we're shooting 1 particle per frame and each of our particles are living for 52 frames. I'm gonna make this 30 frame. So as you can see, our particles have a speed. If I zero it out, our particles won't move anywhere, as you can see. If you want to change the emitter itself, you can of course do that by clicking on the emitter settings. You can choose between a circle and a rectangle, and you can set the X and Y size, and also you can set the direction of the particles. So if you set a speed like 100, and you set the X and Y valve to 0, all of your particles are going into the same direction. If you set this to 360, in both of the dimensions, your particles will move anywhere, as you can see. So this is how you set up your main particles. Of course you can choose between different types of particles. There is standard light and you can also born from particles. And you can choose where you want to burst from. You can burst from an emitter, a surface, a volume of an object, or you can burst from another group of particles. So if you want to burst from surface, you want to make an object, you want to make it editable by clicking on the Make Editable button. You can also find it here, or you can just press C. So now you have created a polygonal object. Go back to the emitter and drag your object here. So as you can see, right now the particles are emitted from the cube itself. So if you move the cube, the particles will be emitted from the cube, of course. So if you have an object, you can also select light particle type. The light particles have no speed by default, so if you want to have speed, you must set it in the dynamic functions. So this is how you set up your main particles. So right now you have created your main particles and you want to create your child particles. What you need to do is to select a child particle type. You can select between generating over life and you can also generate on collision. Right now we will be using generate over life and we are shutting 1 particle from every main particle when they die. The same speed and the same life are set up. This is the default settings, but of course you can change everything here and also you can change the emitter settings. So what happens now is the particles are changing groups. Because they are going with the same speed, you will see that they are changing groups. Of course, if you vary the speed, the green particles will be slower than the than the red particles. So this is how you generate your child particles. After creating your main and child particles, the next thing you want to do is to affect them by dynamic functions. In the particles kit dynamics null object, you have the user interface you need, and for first you need to set up your groups here as well. So your main particles group will be the main group, and your child particle group will be the child group. You can also affect main particles or child particles, both of them or none of them. Right now we will be affecting our main particles. As you can see, you can select 17 different options here. So right now I will be starting with the gravity. So you turn your gravity on and you see that there is an empty object field here. What you want to do here is to go to the objects and create a null object. You want to rename this, double clicking on it and type gravity here. Go back to the dynamic functions and drag your gravity object here. So right now you're using a planar gravity with the strength of 100. So your particles right now are starting to move. I'm gonna make this more visible by selecting my particles don't have a speed in the main particle settings. So as you can see right now our particles are starting to go as the gravity points. But right now the gravity points in the wrong direction, so you select the gravity and rotate this by 90 degrees. So as you can see, right now your particles are falling down with the gravity, because it's a planar gravity for now. You can also use a spherical gravity, so your particles will try to follow the center of the gravity object. You can also move and rotate your gravity object here. And of course, with a positive strength value, your particles will try to get to the center of the gravity object. But if you select a negative value, your particles will always try to move further from the center of the object, as you can see here. So this is how it works. I'm gonna frame the default scheme. I'm gonna delete this gravity object for now, and I'm gonna disable the gravity as well. You can use wind, you can also use friction. For friction I'm gonna have a speed of 100 and I want to emit them into one direction, so I'm zeroing out x and y fold. And as you can see, if you enable friction with a value of 10, your particles will slow down. This is what friction means, of course. You can use a deflector, you can use motion inheritance. I'm gonna show you the deflector for now. So what you want to do here is you want to create an object. I'm gonna create this cube for now. So this will be the collider. So what you want to do here is you enable the deflector, make this cube editable, drag your object here in the object field, select the deflector type, this is an object. And what you also want to do is to have some bounce here, 50%. And as you can see, your particles are bouncing back. What I wanted to show you before is that you go back to your emitter, to the child particles, and you set your particles to generate on collision. They will generate when the particles are colliding, as you can see. And of course, what you can do is you go back to the dynamic functions and tell the particles kit dynamics to affect the child particles as well, so they are bouncing back. So this is how it works. You can also set your particles to die on the collision. So you can use motion inheritance as well. I'm gonna delete this cube for now. I'm gonna create a sphere. I'm gonna make this an icosahedron with 12 segments or so. And I'm gonna go back to my emitter. I want to emit from a surface. And I'm gonna select this burst settings. I'm gonna select this sphere, make this editable. Go back to my emitter, and I'm gonna, right now, as you can see, my particles are being generated from the sphere. And when I go back to my dynamic settings, turn my motion inheritance on, drag my sphere into the object field, set an inheritance of 100%, a rotation inheritance of 100%. What will happen now is when you move your sphere, the particles will follow its motion. Of course, it's not working in the live view, because Expresso codes often needs values at every frame, and when you're editing your cube, it doesn't get values at every frame. So what I want to do now is enable a Cinema 4D tag called vibrate, and I'm gonna make this a regular pulse, and I'm gonna have a position enabled. So as you can see, it's a little bit distracting. So as you can see, the particles are following the motion of the cube, and also they are following the rotation of the cube, as you can see. So this is how the dynamic settings work here. You can use freeze, die, rolling, repose and bounce for the particles itself. So they are starting to move away from each other. You can use freeze as well, and you can use age gradients as well here, and almost every dynamic function has this age gradient here, so you can animate your particles over the life of those particles. This is how the dynamic settings work. You should play around with it, and of course you can enable many of them at once. So right now our particles are doing this up and down motion during their lifetime. They are being affected by a gravity object. I'm going to create one for now. So you have a lot of options here. I'm going to make this a planar gravity, 100 strength, and I'm going to point this down as I showed you before. So you can combine these dynamic functions as well. So you have the ability to use any dynamic functions without the need to use espresso codes or anything like that. So you can create various effects and settings here, and the possibilities are almost endless. 17 dynamic options, and you can combine any of them. For the last part, I'm gonna show you the particles kit visibility. So the most basic thing you can do with visibility is the particle shape. But before that, as usual in this particles kit, you must set your groups. So we want to make the main particles visible, and we want to have a shape for each of those particles. So I'm gonna create a cube for now. I'm gonna resize it to 20 by 20 by 20, and I'm gonna drag my object in here. And what you may also can use is to have a bounding radius, and of course you can render instances if you like, and of course you can animate your cube as well. But as you can see, after a particle is being created, it won't your fillet options won't affect that. So you can create many things with this. So as you can see, your particles are visible in the render view, and also you can render instances, which means that when you use these fillet options, your particles will have the fillet visible as well. So this is how the particle shape tool works, but as you can see, your particles are not really colliding with each other. You can of course set this in the repose and bounce, but what I wanted to use is the MoGraph dynamics. That's why I created the particle cloner. So I'm going to disable the particle shape and enable the particle cloner. I want to clone the cubes into the main particles. I'm going to switch my particles to on, and as you can see, by default it's quite the same as the main particles. I mean the particle shape, but what the difference between them is that you can enable MoGraph dynamics. So as you can see, your individual particles are particle shapes. The geometry of those particles are colliding with each other. So this is very cool if you want to have something like that. And of course you can also make your emitter, I mean the surface object what you use to emit your particles from, you can also make this a dynamic object. But what you don't want is your main object to move, so you're disabling the dynamic in the dynamic settings. So right now, after the particles are being generated, you can affect them by the sphere shape itself. So you have a lot of possibilities and options in the MoGraph, of course. So if you go into the visibility functions, you see that there is a cloner and the Mo instance here. You can affect the Mo instance, and you can affect the cloner as well. So if you want to create something like you want your particles to have a formula, right now as you can see they are using this formula to get their size. So this is how it works. And of course, if you don't want all of your particles to inherit the same formula or any effector you want, what you want to do is to delete this formula from here and enable the formula from the to the cloner, and as you can see, it iterates between all of those particles and enables the formula at their own time. So I think this is very useful. You can create a lot of things with this as well, and you can also use the Mo instance your history depth, so all of your particles are being followed by another particles, but you need to set some transform here so they are not colliding with the particles here. So as you can see, you have a lot of options here. So if you want, you can create anything you want. If you have some experience in MoGraph, now you have the strength to use your particle emitters and dynamics and combine them with the MoGraph effectors as well. So this is all about the particle cloner for now. I think this is a very powerful tool. So after that, you have the option to trace your particles. You just need to drag your main particles into the include section, and you want to turn this on. And as you can see, right now your particles are creating splines for you. And if you set a hair material to those, you will see that your particles right now are generating hair. Sorry, I'm gonna do this right now. So as you can see, you have hair from particles, which is very good, I think. This is the particle tracer, and for the last step, what you can create as well, you can create particle pyrocluster. You need to turn this on, and of course by default it will show the shape that you have assigned. What you want to do here is to assign a pyrocluster material, and you also want to enable the pyrocluster here. So you want to use this pyrocluster volume tracer to the environment object, and after you hit render, your particles will be visible if you have your pyrocluster volume tracer render object enabled. So as you can see, right now we have our particles generating the cloud objects or something like that. You also go back to your shapes. You want larger radius of pyrocluster particles. So as you can see, right now your particles generates pyrocluster smoke objects or pyrocluster itself. So it's something like you can create fire from this, you can create anything you want. As you can see, if you go to the global settings and you use something like fireball, yes, I really want to convert those parameters, but I want only 50% of radius here. And when you render out, as you can see right now, you have some storm. Of course, if you use some lights and you use a background, it will look very nice. And also you can use global illumination here as well. What you also can do, of course, is you can duplicate any of these null objects and you can create very, very complex skins. So imagine you have something like 7 emitters, so they are generating 14 groups of particles. You have different dynamic options for each of the particles, and you make them visible. Basically, you can use this as many times as you want, and you can create iterations. So I think this is very cool because you don't have to go to Espresso at all to have all the functions that can be applied in the thinking particles. And of course, this rig is compatible with other thinking particle presets. You can find them on the Cinema 4D preset library and so on. So this is all about the particles kit for now. I'm gonna create more demo videos over time, and I'm gonna show you how widely you can use this kit. So you can use MoGraph, you can use pyroclusters, you can use hair, you can use effectors to the particles, you can use a various number of tools already available. So this is all I wanted to tell you. Thanks for your time, thanks for watching this, and have a nice day.